masochistic side kind of took the steering wheel this summer, and he's calling the shots right now. So even though I was transported to the kiln of the first flame, after a trip through the Boreal Valley, it looks like I somehow wound up in Krat. And given what that pretty crestfallen looking weirdo told me, it seems like if I play all the Souls-likes I own, maybe I can get out of here and make it back to my own world. And while I'm embarking on this quest, we may as well make a show out of it, maybe even learn something new. We'll do some research into the circumstances surrounding the creation and influences of these games. We'll tackle their handling of story versus gameplay and the new mechanics and additions they bring to the table, and determine for ourselves, is there truly a king of the Souls-likes as some people claim? We'll see. Took a while for me to find, but I should be safe in here. It's a big hotel, and if those bolts on those doors are strong enough to keep pee out from the other side, they should be more than enough for the puppets. Right? Right? Ugh. Let's just keep going. This is your first and only warning. We're getting heavy into spoilers in this video. As Fuoco falls and we venture outside of Krat for the first time, there's something important we need to discuss, and it's going to be a pretty constant thread throughout this entire series, and may indeed be why my inner masochist stranded me here in the first place: the frustration factor. If you're talking about Souls-likes, this is a topic that'll always come up because the genre is quite literally built on it. It's good for a game to be challenging. Challenge makes beating a game really exciting because you had to work at it and learn it. But as I said a couple videos ago, a Souls game or Souls-like is generally going to feature a mixture of legitimate challenge and bullshit. And if you play a lot of these games, you probably like that balance on some level, even if you say you don't. The bullshit makes the game kind of unpredictable in a fun way, and it gives you a lot of great memories to look back on. But Shalashaska, it's so easy to overcook it, and we will look at some overcooked examples down the line. But as much as I complain about overcooked bullshit challenge, here's where the shame of masochism comes in. Lies of P was so fair and balanced in the first leg of the game that before the difficulty ramped up, I felt underwhelmed, if not bored. It didn't mean the game wasn't good, it just meant that it wasn't getting my blood boiling and my fists clenching like a Souls-like typically does in the first few hours. To translate, I was disappointed because the game wasn't making me upset enough. Let that demonstrate the relationship that I have with Souls games. Eventually, the game does stop gently patting your ass. You leave Krat and you venture into the countryside to a place called Moonlight Town, and after that, the St. Frangelico Cathedral, because no eldritch mid-19th century European horror game is complete without a scary ghoulish town out in the sticks and a giant cathedral with an unimaginable horror slumbering there. And it was here, getting sniped at, trying to navigate narrow walkways, missing jumps. It was here for the first time in the game I started to feel the sweat on the back of my neck and the fire under my ass, and I was like, yes, yes, this is it! And it's doubly appropriate that this is where things heat up, because this is also where you start to see that everything isn't what it seems in Krat. In Moonlight Town, everyone's been transformed. Horrifyingly, you find out that the petrification disease can also mutate not only people, but animals, into monsters of all shapes and sizes and abilities that the game calls carcasses. But even as the difficulty accelerated and completely new enemies got added into the mix, I never had to cheese, I never had to go back and grind, and I was able to beat every boss simply by being thoughtful in my weapon design, learning the boss's moves, getting good at my parries, and using my specials, which the game calls Fable Arts. I am no god among gamers, man. I've beaten some tougher stuff here and there, but I'm not incredible by any means. So trust me, if I beat it, if you're watching this video, you can do it too. The introduction of carcasses also means you've got to start thinking about what elemental vulnerabilities in your enemies you want to exploit, similarly to handling beast and kin differently in Bloodborne. You're given a lot of tools to take advantage of, from throwables to special grindstones that coat your weapon in an element, and best of all, the Legion arm. The arm essentially takes the place of magic and was a really cool and helpful addition. Electric is good on puppets, and fire is good on monsters, and it's easy to tell which is which, unlike Bloodborne, where sometimes you're not sure what the hell you're looking at. The first tough boss of the game, in my opinion, is the Archbishop, who starts off as a horrific monster before transforming into an even more horrific monster. What I'm going to say here is just a preference. It doesn't mean the game's bad, but the two separate stage boss thing, I'm not a huge fan. And I feel like Elden Ring, while not the first From game to do it, popularized the format even more. To me, it just feels like it stops being a test of skill and starts being a test of endurance and memorization. Less about actually beating the boss and more about just playing it over and over and over for hours until you can play the first fight perfectly enough to have enough heals to survive the second one. Now, granted, that's what games were about back in the day, so maybe you like that approach, but I don't. Not to mention, in a lot of games with two-phase boss fights, the first phase will usually be so comparatively easy, you can guess when a second one is coming, even if you've never fought the boss before. That is absolutely not the case with Lies of P. It'll become easy eventually, because you've done it so many times and you start to lock in because you know you've got another fight, but there were many bosses in this game where I barely beat that first phase and was horrified to see a second phase. But if I'm being honest, that feeling of horror and depression when you see that second boss cutscene happen and you realize you aren't done is a feeling you can only get gaming. The world of Lies of P is so fleshed out and interesting, and as you progress through it, you'll see so many cool things. A common place where a lot of Souls-likes cut corners is enemy variety, which is a shame, because my favorite thing about From games is seeing new, weird, unexplained shit around every corner and leaving lore, at least at first, to your imagination. And Lies of P really delivered on that aspect of the experience. Everywhere you go, you'll see something you've never seen before. As you brave the absolutely decrepit Malum district, you'll duel this group of thugs called the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, before continuing on to Rosa Isabel Street, which leads to the Opera House, where the mighty king of puppets controls the automaton army, and it's up to you to take him out. But before you can fight him, you've got to get there first, wading through armies of puppets doing all kinds of crazy shit, self-destructing, throwing bombs, shooting fire, and a giant terrifying clown who laughs at you while he whoops your ass. And once you actually get inside the Opera House, beaten down and demoralized, it only gets harder and weirder. Giant boxing clown wasn't enough for you? How about some crackhead mannequins who attack indefinitely, and scary opera singing spider ladies who control them? And once you somehow make it through all that, you've got what's easily the hardest boss in the game so far, but also the most interesting, because before the fight, you're shown a little play hinting at a connection between you and the king, who reveals his true name in the second phase, Romeo. Lies of P may be a pretty clear homage to the greatness that came before it, but it also carves out a unique spot for itself, and one of the ways that it does that is by putting its narrative at the forefront in a way that Bloodborne never did. The other night, I was watching some episodes of Creepcast, and one of the hosts, Hunter, who some of you may know as Papa Meat, or more famously Meat Canyon, said that while ambiguity was a very powerful tool in horror, you also had to be careful not to overuse it, much like a powerful flavor in a dish. Bloodborne is ambiguous because they decided not to write a complete story for it. And while that approach is awesome, because in horror a lot of times you're going to have an easier time scaring people by letting them imagine things for themselves, there's a lot of value in not only telling a clear, focused story, but also tying the themes of that story into everything in your game, from gameplay to level design, and that's one of the big things that Lies really excels at. As the game goes on, things only get harder and scarier. After dethroning the king, Geppetto gives you a missive to track down the shady alchemists, who are vaguely hinted to be behind the weird shit going down, much like the choir in Bloodborne.
Rumors say the alchemists there have developed a cure.
And at the grand exhibition, after getting drilled, blown up and shoved off of ledges by robots, and drop-kicked by cyborg strongmen, meet the alchemists we finally do. Enter the main villain after half the game somehow, Simon Manus, the alchemist's leader who mainly monologues some things that you've probably already figured out by now. That ergo, souls in this game, is a manifestation of human life force and memory, and that they're using it to create monsters and mess with human evolution in the form of the cyborgs you just met.
This is where evolution becomes real!
The story I actually gave a shit about. Like Bloodborne, it's built around a mysterious organization, shadowy powers that you don't fully understand. But unlike Bloodborne, they decided to actually write the full story. And like I said before, there's merits to both approaches, but man, the amount of exposition you get in this game is jarring. You're going to get some long monologues, cutscenes, letters, newspaper articles, journal entries, all kinds of stuff that's going to put you into the world and give you the story. You will know what is going on in this game by the time the credits roll. So, it was nice to play a Souls-like where I felt like I actually cared about the characters and could follow along with storylines in a way where I didn't have to Google everything. So to chase the alchemists back to their villainous fortress on their secret island, you need to find some special fuel for a Vanini-built vehicle, which forces you out to the sticks again, where you're attacked by a horrible monster that's lived out there for some time now. And during the heated fight, something really interesting happens. You find out that the monsters can actually possess the empty husks of puppets, and so the monster's second phase is a way harder version of the cop boss from way earlier in the game. With this revelation, you'll start to encounter beefed up versions of the enemies you've been dealing with, possessing monster and puppet moves together, and this is one of the best and coolest things this game does. It wasn't just that the plot twist was cool and scary and allowed for even more horrific enemy designs, it was that it actually made a difference in the gameplay. You're not just dealing with scary marionettes now. You're dealing with scary marionettes with tentacles and tendrils and slime and all other kinds of nice horror imagery. And so this run back to the hotel, which of course has been attacked, is one of the most atmospheric stretches of any game I've played. Oh, the hotel gets attacked? That's a shame. And the good thing I'm safe all the way over... Souls games aren't just similar gameplay-wise, they're also often similar tonally and in terms of story structure. One thing we're going to see recur is the proverbial descent, which can simply be described as the trip into the heart of darkness. The journey from relatively benign or surface-level scares to truly diabolical and twisted evil and horror.
There's anyone in my eyes.
Sometimes that's a metaphorical descent into madness, but it can also be an actual adventure into the bowels of a castle or a cave or a scary island or the depths of the ocean. But whatever it is, the stuff you see in the game gets steadily freakier and potentially more difficult to understand as you get closer to a truth that you were denied in the first act. A good descent links the truth with terror and is an unbelievably powerful tool for atmosphere, and Lies has a terrifically done descent. You find out at the end of the game that this giant mass of crystals called the Devil's Pit, which destroys the streets of Krat, is a potentially living organism of extraterrestrial origin that infects the things around it and is presumably the original source of the petrification disease. Cyborgs, spider ladies, scary clowns, giant giggling babies, enormous mechas, tentacle monsters, tree sentinels. They did a terrific job with the creature design in this game. There's a lot of very fun, scary designs, especially with the monsters, but even with the puppets, they did a great job of playing off of the natural creepiness that mannequins are known to have. Another theme we'll keep seeing pop up in these games is endgame difficulty spikes. It always seems like all they can do with these games in the end is just make everything ridiculously harder than the rest of the game and throw boss after boss at you. Maybe spike is the wrong word for this game, because as hard as Lies of P got, it did so along a very smooth difficulty curve, at least after the King of Puppets. But sure enough, I regretted saying I wanted bullshit, because boy did it start to happen. It's rare, but you'll encounter some cheap deaths you couldn't possibly predict or avoid. For example, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood rematch.
Death has come for you.
Good lord. You got one guy spamming throwables at you from a corner. You got another guy constantly grappling you towards him, breaking your combos, and sometimes even pulling you out of position for viscerals. No matter who you choose to go for first, you're screwed. Could it be any worse? Yes, it can. The Brotherhood made a deal with the alchemists to revive the oldest brother, who serves as the final phase of the fight. And if you can manage to take out all the siblings at the same time, you can fight him by himself, which makes it much more manageable. But when he's down for a visceral, the fucko has a counter that you will not be prepared for because you've never seen a visceral counter before, and it will kill you. What the hell? I'm being punished for being good? Am I fighting raging Brachydios? Air God willing, you'll clear the Brotherhood and make it to the Alchemist's secret island. But before you can make Simon answer to your steel, you gotta make it past the beaches of Normandy. Mortars, giant monsters, and a maze of dungeons and castle hallways stand between you and finishing the nightmare once and for all. And in the process, you'll fight just about every difficult normal enemy you've seen so far in a balls-to-the-wall final run that asks you, just how fucking bad do you want to beat this game? You like bloodshot eyes? No, you don't? How about cramped hands? Really? You don't like that either? Well, that's too goddamn bad. Because just when you think that you're at the end of this horror-infested tunnel, you see the flickering light down the road, the game hits you with one final roadblock before the final bosses. Lexasia. Holy shit. She's basically Simon's servant, bodyguard, lover, all of the above? I don't know. But either way, she's the last challenge between you and the finale, and the hardest thing in not just the game, but most Souls-likes I've ever played. Her first phase is slow, but hits like a truck, and her second phase is an actual god. Between all the teleportation and particle effects, it's hard to even tell what's going on, let alone getting an opening to attack her. And this is where the fusion of Sekiro and Bloodborne elements starts to become an issue. I found that there were many times where I'd get off a parry chain only to have no stamina and be unable to attack by the end. The only good thing I really have to say about Lexasia is that if you can beat her, rest assured you can beat this game. And once you deal with Lexasia, if you were a good bad boy and lied throughout the game, you've got 2 final bosses to deal with, 2 phases each. Simon starts rambling about using Ergo to reshape the world in his image.
A key that unlocks true evolution.
And we know that anytime someone starts talking like that in a game, it's time to put him down. In a boss battle that doubles as a litmus test for whether you'd make a good air traffic controller, because you need to keep track of about 15 different things at once. And you see the sun coming up, and you think you're done, but no. Because like Bloodborne, if you want to see the true ending, you'll refuse to take the easy route offered to you by your sketchy elderly mentor. This triggers one last bout against the reanimated corpse of Carlo, who of course has a trick weapon and about 30 different attacks. This is an aspect of challenge I think is very often overlooked. In a Souls game, you have to learn the boss's moves. Naturally, the more moves a boss has, the harder it's going to be to remember how to respond to all those moves. So, even though I'd say Lexasia is the hardest in the game, Carlo really isn't far behind her. But with patience and careful attention, you'll triumph eventually. I did it. I did it. Holy hell, I did it. To sum up that experience, all I have to say is, do you think the game is hard enough? Holy hell. The one substantial criticism I have of the game overall is its level design. One of my favorite parts of playing a From game are all the nooks and crannies. There's always going to be lots of hidden passages and rooms to explore, convoluted, unorthodox pathways to new places, sometimes entire areas of the game hidden away in a place you might completely miss, and it gives the world a sense of mystique and secrecy. In Lies of P, level design is usually extremely straightforward. Now, this is something we're going to see pop up with some of the other Souls-likes we'll talk about, but usually, simpler level design will be balanced out by more complex combat design and vice versa. From can get away with simple combat design because exploring is so involved in their games, whereas something like Neo is more focused on the action and exploring is secondary. In this game, though, not only was combat simple, but the levels were incredibly linear, so that aspect of complexity in one or the other I felt was missing. And so, as jaw-dropping an experience as this often was, something in it felt hollow to me just because that extra layer of depth that's usually there, whether with action or exploration, was missing. Still a damn good game though. All in all, it's not an easy game in any capacity, taking From's 2 hardest games. But you're given so many tools that it balances out, and most of the time, when you die, it's your fault. Experimentation is the key here. One thing From really fails at is creating an experience that encourages experimentation, because you have to have certain stats to use certain weapons. Yeah, you can respec, but you need very rare items to do it. And even if it was unlimited, it'd still be a hassle to redo all your stats just to try a new weapon you might end up hating anyway. Frustration is a bit of a factor down the line, but pound for pound, this is one of the fairest and most balanced games you'll play at this level of difficulty. Well, it's done. It is. This is what you wanted, right? Well, it does seem like the Devil's Pit is clearing up outside after the defeat of Simon. Maybe I'll be able to make my way to the next place, wherever that is. Tune in next time and we'll find out together. Gotta get back to my pad. Summer of Souls Likes.